Berkeley was easy. I'd come back from Europe. I'd been living there without a job. Showed up in San Francisco. You know, I've got an old friend from high school. He says, yeah, sleep on my couch. He works for Bank of America. And one morning we get up and we're in the newspaper, and he says, you know, you really got to get a job. You know, he wanted his couch back for sure. And there was an article about the CIA, there was and some shit, I don't know what it was at the time, the Pike Church committee hearings, you know. It was really bad, so we thought that'd be a hilarious joke. Says, why don't you apply to the CIA? So he trundles off to work, puts his suit on, you know, pinstripe the whole thing, and I'm lounging around in my pajamas. And so, you know, about 10 o'clock, I call the Federal Center in San Francisco and say, hey, can you give me the number for the CIA? And there was this like long pause. And they said, oh yeah, you heard some, you know, messing around with papers. And so she gives me a number, and it's in Lawndale, California. So I call them, and very tired, bored voice says, yeah, what's your address? So they send me an application. And by that time, I've moved in to a house with anarchists in Berkeley. And Berkeley was very liberal in the early 70s, very liberal. So I get this application, I take it up to my room and, you know, fill it out. And it's like, it goes on for like 50 pages of just minutiae you wouldn't even believe, just crap. And as I fill it out and I send it off. And it's like, you know, applying for the, you know, it's like, you know, the lottery or something. You don't expect to hear anything. It's the last. So they call me up and say, hey, you know, we like your application. Can you sit for an interview in San Francisco? And I go down, and it was the Hilton downtown San Francisco. Call the guy up in his room and say, hey, my name is Bob Baer. I'm here for a job interview. And he says, okay, I got you. And wait downstairs and call me back in 2 hours or an hour or whatever it was. And so this is really strange. I'm sitting in the lobby looking around thinking, who's watching me? What's this deal about? And so I call him back, and he says, all right, you can come up now. He come up, and he explains what the CIA is, how it's divided into analysts on one side of the house, and they're like academics, and everybody knows you work for the CIA. We put you through graduate school, and you're interested in Chinese stuff. We'll put you Chinese, and you get, it sound like attractive. It sound like going to graduate school. I said, yeah, I'll take that job. And he says, well, the problem is you without an MA, without a master's degree, we really can't do it now. But maybe you can apply in a couple of years. But on the other hand, we have this thing called operations, and then he starts getting into this whole goddamn thing about mumbo jumbo, going overseas and carrying a weapon and meeting agents and. I never watched a James Bond movie, seriously watched it, never considered it. And it was one of those, things that were so distant that I didn't really pay attention to them. And I said, yeah, I'll take it. It's like if someone says, let's go bungee jumping 5 years from now, you don't ever expect it to happen. You say yes to anything. So I said yes. And sure enough, they call me up about 2 months later, invite me to Washington. Show up, they give me a polygraph and interviews and the rest of it. And I thought, here at this point, they're going to figure out what the fraud is. They're going to figure out who I am. And I don't really belong in the Central Intelligence Agency. And I go back to Berkeley and never expecting to hear from them. I go to enroll in graduate school, University of California, in Chinese, and they call me up and say, hey, can you show up in Washington in 2 weeks? I said, should I come next week? Everything I owned, I sold, got rid of. I had an old Ford Torino, dumped it at my mother's house, and off to Washington I went. And that started a 21-year career in operations, and that's how I got to where I am today. When you write a book, you've got to leave a lot of the detail in between because it's irrelevant. With the Buckley assassination, I knew the guy before he went to Lebanon and then was later kidnapped and died in captivity. I wrote a novel about this. It's called Blow the House Down. And so much of what I put in that novel was fictionalized in order to get it through the CIA censors. Because everything I write I have to send to the CIA. They can either bring me up for criminal charges if I don't, or civil charges. They can sue me for profits, or it's a real pain in the ass getting sued by the federal government. You don't ever want to do it. So a lot of what I put in my books is fictionalized. My first book, I started out by simply blacking out stuff. And that's to tell the reader, hey guys, I can't put everything I know or why I know it. I mean, I know shit that I'm convinced is true. And if I sat down and told you why I was convinced, how I found this out, where and when, they'd put me in jail. So I blacked it out. And then people said, well, what is this shit, So then I simply put a lot of this stuff in fiction, which is a narrative that works sometimes, if you get it. So yeah, I put it in fiction. A lot of people do this. I mean, we are, at the end of the day, we are prevented from telling the truth as we know it. And the truth only makes sense in its totality. It's not, individual shit, facts here and there, or it's never on a piece of paper. Because any real secret in the Central Intelligence Agency isn't put on paper. I mean, how did Rick Ames get caught? If they say, oh, it was old ladies in tennis shoes, and they went around and they used matrices and they figured out who it was. That's just bullshit. It's an utter, outright lie. I mean, it's just an outright lie how the Boston bombing occurred. Those guys did not make that bomb. And I know that because I talked to the people who bagged the evidence. They just didn't make the bomb. That's it. I don't know who made the bomb. I don't think the FBI knows.
They were just messengers.
They were simply handed the bomb, set the bomb off, but who actually made the bomb, changed the wiring in the pressure cooker, I don't know, and neither does the FBI. But that's the kind of truth that is not let out to the public, because it's not the official narrative. Because the official narrative is too damning and makes the government do things it doesn't want to do. If the narrative were taken out and put in its literal, fact by fact, then Americans would demand something be done. For instance, the 9/11 bombing. If you looked at the facts, stacked them end on end, you'd say, well, first of all, we attacked the wrong country, which was Iraq, and that we missed the country who was really behind 9/11, according to the facts, and that's Saudi Arabia. We just don't want to touch it. And I'm not anti-Saudi. The Saudis are just like, other people to me. They had their reasons. They had their reasons for supporting these people, and they did it. I deal in fact. I don't deal in conspiracies. I'm sent off to Tajikistan in 1992. I don't really know the Russians, but I want to get to know them because it's a different tribe, and to know the Russians, you have to go through their same rituals, which, among other things, is enormous amount of drinking. I mean, drinking that I'm not used to, where you are taking tumbler full of vodka, warm, and just downing it. That glass is like yay big, and you just drink yourself under the table. Otherwise, you don't get in with the Russians. So one night, I started drinking with them, and it was, at the time, I knew this was a bad idea, all this drinking. We drank all night. And in the morning, they woke me up and said, hey, now we have to really go out and prove ourselves as men. And we jump in a car, a Jeep, a Russian Jeep, a Waz Jeep, and drive out into the Pamir Mountains and pull up next to a biplane, an AN-2, and they said, now we're going to go parachute jumping with a hangover like you wouldn't believe. So they put the parachute on me, and we get in, and there's all these Special Forces troops all lined up on each bank of seats, and we take off, and I'm not too drunk not to notice it's a storm. And you really don't want to jump into a storm. Not only that, I had no clue what kind of parachute I had on. I had parachuted with the CIA, but they always tell you what it is, and here's the toggle, here's the emergency chute, and all this stuff. None of that I knew, and we get up, and we're circling in the clouds, and we're way up in the clouds, and the plane is blowing around, and the colonel says, You are our American guest, and it's our honor to let you jump first. You are what we call the wind dummy. And so I jumped out of this airplane in a storm, and it was completely nuts. And they tried to get me to jump into a circle of BTRs, which are armored personnel carriers. And they said, that's our landing zone, is you got to land in the middle of them. And I was smart enough. I said, forget this. I just headed off. Because if you land on an armored personnel vehicle, it goes both legs. So I just headed the other way. But anyhow, we got along very well. And what really disturbed me was afterwards, for the second jump, they wanted me to jump again, but they were having their girlfriends pack the chutes. And I had no idea whether they knew what they were doing, but they were packing their chutes, and this is just all sort of dumb. Anyhow, that was and it went from there, and they sort of adopted me in the tribe, and these Russian assassins were showing me their weapons, these special bullets they had, and going down range and shooting with them, and they said, here's your tank, and they'd let me drive a T-72 tank, and that was my life on the frontier. I wrote a book called The Perfect Kill. It was a book about hunting down, the world's most accomplished assassin, and the idea was to get close to him. The problem is that the CIA will not let me say how I got close to him. It's just forbidden. And I got it in the same room with him, not me physically. But I got to the point where I was in a position to kill him, and things started to fall apart. But it's like in the book, I talk about a story, a related story to illustrate the bigger narrative, but I can't really talk about how close we got to him and why I knew it was him and how I was able to recognize his voice in the same room and was in a position to kill him. They just cut it out. Well, I mean, all the time, Haj Radwan, basically knew who the CIA people were, and he kidnapped Bill Buckley, my boss, because he knew he was the chief of station, and he was going out to the airport in Beirut, and he wanted that guy. And there were a couple other assassinations of officials near me where we knew that he was targeting us. There was a French attaché that was targeting him, a bunch of kidnappings, shooting down airplanes, and the rest of it. He was really, really good. Haj Radwan had very good intelligence on who we were and what we did, and even had intelligence on the American embassy. He had assets inside the American embassy, which I later found out. So he was always one step ahead of us. It's like going in, it's like being in the Bush League, playing in a major league game. You sort of know that the chances of winning are 0 to none, but you still had to go into the game. You had to show up. I felt like Plimpton, when he played professional ball, or, through all these other acts, because the guy was a murderer. He knew what he was doing, and he knew how to get people. He was the same guy who the CIA eventually assassinated in Damascus with they filled a spare tire with explosives as he came out of a restaurant he often went to, and he was breaking his rules, by the way. He comes out of the restaurant, walks behind his car. As soon as he's behind the tire, they command detonate him, kill the guy, blow him in half. It's a rough game. It's not for amateurs. And, I say this having been an amateur pretty much at this, but, once you're dropped in a position like that, you got to play the game. Or you can come home. That was the other option. Look, when I was in Iraq, I developed a relationship with the tribes in Ramadi and Fallujah in Al Anbar province. And it was a lifelong investment in relationships. I knew their kids, I knew everybody. So during the war in 2003, I got in touch with them, and they said, would you come and be with us as the American invasion occurs? And I said, yes, I'll come there. My wife and I were crossing the border into Jordan when we were stopped by the local police. They said, no, you can't go in. And I was about ready to. Look. Let me go back. We were going to go into Iraq, and the tribe said, "Listen, there's somebody we want you to talk to. Would you cross the border? Would you come stay with us during the invasion? And there's this very important person that we'd like you to meet." And they wouldn't say on the phone. And I said, "Yes, I'll do it." So we were on our way into Iraq. We got held up at the border, about ready to meet the guy. And that night, what had happened is the U.S. Air Force had intercepted my conversations with the guys in Iraq, and that they realized that the very important person that I was to meet was Saddam Hussein. And what they did was they fired a JDAM, these very big missiles, down the signal to hit him, to hit Saddam. And what happened was the signal had come from the house we were supposed to stay in, and it exploded. So what I figured out in Iraq is just how expendable people like me are. In order to get somebody like Saddam Hussein, they'll kill all my friends, they'll kill me, anybody, my wife, it didn't matter. It just, you get to the point where your life is, in their eyes, is worthless. The pivotal points occur, it's a cascading, The pivotal points in a career in the CIA, you figure out how much you're worth, you sort of learn by the day. It's a place where you can get to the truth, who you are, and how important you are, or unimportant, as the case could be. And it was an education for me. Remember, when I joined the CIA in 1976, it was all an education. It was like a substitute graduate school, where I'm learning the way things work and how people treat each other, and priorities, and how we were all lied to about the invasion of Iraq, how they knew the intelligence was bad. I knew the intelligence was bad. I now know how the New York Times was sucked in, how Congress was sucked in, how the American people were sucked in. So you're living in a world of mirrors and smoke, and you're able to see through this stuff. Let's be honest. The only thing we can do is really be honest at the end of the day. And I had a really bad marriage, and I had 3 kids from the marriage, and my career, in a sense, was coming to an end because I'd been in Iraq. I had tried to kill Saddam Hussein. I got out of Iraq and immediately got involved in campaign financing, investigating it. Found some dirty money going into the Democratic Party. At that point, my career, my marriage were both falling apart. Then I fell in love with another woman. And so, you triangulate this. And that was really the turning point in my life. When everything you depend upon goes away and there's something new, and you run for it. I was 45 years old at the time. And I convinced her, my current wife, to resign from the CIA because she had a promising career, and we just both got up and we ran away to Beirut. But was this the CIA's fault? No, it wasn't the CIA's fault. They didn't produce my bad marriage. They didn't produce dysfunctional family. They didn't, ultimately, intelligence, you got to be honest with yourself as well as your bosses. I mean, they didn't create my problems, but it's a coincidence of all these problems that changed the whole course of my life, which made me resign 5 years short of retirement and just try something completely different. But for me, the CIA was always a personal voyage, as much as it was of doing great service for the American people. You're always learning new stuff. You're learning how to parse the truth. You're learning the way politics work. And it's like making sausage. It's not pretty. A lot of people will, this, will figure this out on their own. They don't need to join the CIA to figure out how ugly things are. I needed to actually go get in the middle of it before I could figure it out. I've known my share of crooks and frauds and outright liars, and they were constantly knocking on the front door, the Central Intelligence Agency, and I'd go out and deal with them. And I would get to the bottom of their lies. And a lot of them were, just peddling bullshit. And they usually wanted money or they wanted something revenge. And so I had to deal with this. I mean, you know, with characters. And what ultimately I learned how to do is triage of information, figure out what information I can base my actions on and what I can't. And what people say is fairly irrelevant to me. What I look for is, you know, these sideways of looking at people, like intercepts, overhead photography, documents. And once you've really got into the way somebody, you know, constructs their lives, and then you get underneath, and that's part of the training. I mean, I was taught to lie. I had hundreds of aliases, alias passports, cover stories, you know, lying to agents, lying to family. I mean, that was just part of the game. You know, they thought I worked for a different agency of the government, and you just lie to them. I mean, I got to the point where I was on the phone, assuming my phone was tapped, I would just make up a story, you know, whatever it was. Unnecessarily, you know, like I'm going to go out and get pizza, where in fact I was going out to, you know, go to Disneyland, just to practice, just constant lying. And you know, once I got out of the CIA, it became a lot easier to just tell the truth. And frankly, I don't give a shit now. You know, just, you know, you ask me what I think, and I tell people. Let's be truthful. Right now, as I sit here, I'm on an Iranian hit list. They would kill me given the chance. This is a matter of public record. CIA told me don't tell this to anybody, and the FBI said, well, do what you have to. So, I mean, I don't take this as a badge of honor. At the same time, I can look at this nuclear agreement with Iran and know it's a good idea, because we're shoving a wedge into the mullah's regime, and that we can actually bring around Iran to the comedy of nations, if you like, where they're ready to deal with us. Can you trust them? No. But is it better to have monitoring inside their nuclear facilities, some monitoring to keep track of what we can see? Yes, as opposed to, we can't bomb them. It's just going to do no good at all to bomb them. So it's a good agreement. I mean, I know that the White House lies as a matter of course. State Department lies as a matter of course. I mean, I could pick apart policy. On the other hand, I know an agreement is going to benefit us at the end of the day. And frankly, we need Iran with the Islamic State on the loose. It's going to be killing people, is going to be a source of instability. We need an ally, and that happens to be Iran. It may not be the ally we want, but that's what we got. And that's just the facts, whether you're coming from the right or the left. We are facing today a sectarian war that's going to go on for 100 years. Islam was born in conflict, civil war, first inside the Prophet's family, and then between Shia and Sunni. It went on for 400 years. Now we've picked this up again, and it's going to go on for a very long time, and it's going to do a lot of damage, and get a lot of dead people, and there is no solution to it. And there's absolutely no point in blaming this president for it. He didn't create this. The invasion of Iraq was Pandora's box, which we opened up prematurely. May have happened in any case. So we've got this. So just, you know, buckle your seatbelts and figure this is going to go on for a long time. It's a conflict between two people whose views of God, Allah, are absolutely diametrically opposed, and they cannot ever come together, at least for a very long time. The Shia look to the past wrongs. The Sunni are worried about their future, that it's going to fall apart, and the only way they can do is strike out, and we happen to be in their sights, and we are going to pay the price. Where it's going to go is unpredictable. I have never seen a major conflict in the Middle East not come to American shores in some form. It may be as simple as a Sunni crazy walking into a Shia mosque in Detroit and blowing himself up. It may be a Sunni crazy blowing up an airplane. They're very easy to blow up. It may be any number of things. It may be shooting up a mall. The biggest problem is lone wolves, people that get on the internet, self-recruited, go get a machine gun. You know, in LA, you know, for an 8-ball, we can get an AK with a silencer. They're nothing. You know, shooting up a mall at Christmas time, how hard could that be? You know, I just don't see this conflict being contained in the Middle East. Just like it hit France, it's going to hit us.
Last question I have, and maybe tomorrow we can do more, but I want to let you sleep. Can you talk about, I'm very much interested in, I really like the way I intuit stuff and gut and use my intelligence to sort of get something. Can you talk about your process? Do you get a gut feeling of something and you go for it, or do you use a lot of intelligence to make that move?
I don't trust my gut at all. The more facile somebody is, the more likable they are, the less I trust them. Anybody who can put on a veneer of being a good guy, friendly, the rest of it, over a long period of time even, is less trustworthy. It's amazing how they'll turn on you because they've had a lot of practice pleasing people around them. I mean, we all please people around us, but somebody who's particularly good at it is more likely to be a psychopath or somebody who's dangerous. So immediately when they go through this whole rigmarole of being a great guy, then I wonder when the knife's going to come in. That's the way I process things. What my mom gave me was curiosity about the world. I talk about myself a lot, but it's mainly to get around to getting other people to talk about themselves and what makes them work. I really care about myself. I don't care about my stories. I don't care about the rest of it. What I care about is what makes other people tick. And she had a curiosity about that, about history, about people, about crazy people, whatever it is. And I think what she really gave me was the ability to read books and read a lot of them and ask questions. So it's the attachment to the printed page, which is an entree into different worlds.
Does the printed page lie?
The printed page lies all the time, but it doesn't matter. It gives you something to think about, and you can figure out for yourself. You know, it's ultimately what goes on outside of me that I care about, and that takes a conscious effort to turn away from what goes on inside of me, because ultimately is a very small thing in what makes the rest of the world tick, because that's what's more interesting. I mean, you know, I with myself, frankly, I don't empathize with myself. I just have a curiosity about myself, and I'm curious about myself because in that I'm like other people, not that different.
Would you have preferred to have been a skier, a champion skier?
I would much rather have been a skier. I would have much rather been a carpenter and just sort of bypassed all of this.
I want to thank you for your service, Bob, and thank you for this interview. This has been a year plus of me.
Well, you can do it anytime you want. You know, if you can just do this as a practice if you like.
Thanks, man.